right after you left out of that meeting, they would go and they would sit and they'd have private conversations with lawyer, and they're like, "How can we terminate him um, without paying any severance? Like how can we do that?"
That's horrible.
And it's interesting to kind of come from your own family.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds like corporate Game of Thrones, really. Hi John. Welcome to Conversation with a Friend. Thanks for joining. Oh, look at you smiling and giggling already. Okay.
You can come up with a better name than that, but
Oh wow. Okay. I thought it was a wonderful name, but I will take that criticism into advisement for the next segment. I think it's too late. I'm committed. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm very committed. So,
that's good.
I've known you for years actually. How long have we known each other?
Oh, at least 15 years,
Is
something
it
like that
actually
now.
10,
It's,
15? Oh
it's
my.
it's probably 15, yeah.
We gotta
And
bring out a cake and celebrate, man. Like,
it's been a while, anyways, and so when we ask
yeah.
each other introductory questions on stuff like this, and
Okay, fair enough. The pleasure has been all mine, just so we're clear. I know a little displeasure on your way, right? Just a little. All right, John, do you mind introducing yourself or how you would describe yourself to people?
yeah, sure. Well, I mean, the problem with that is there's no context on which you would base a description, and so like whatever I can bring up, you might interpret that it's closer to my soul kind of thing. So,
All right,
um,
I think we're getting a gist of what this conversation's gonna be like. But okay, that's fair. How would you describe yourself to people?
yeah. So my name's Jonathan. Recent MBA grad, management consultant. I'm the first son of kind of a fairly large family. Mm, Sure, like where it depends on what we're going to be talking about. What's relevant?
What made you decide to do an MBA and what made you decide to pursue a career in consulting?
Um, well, I kind of hit a bit of a gateway in my career, I guess. I was kind of deeply unhappy. I've kind of was stagnant for a number of years, and I figured an MBA would actually kind of open a lot of doors for me. It did, it did in a way. It wasn't kind of what I expected, but uh, the MBA was kind of like just the next step. And I was always kind of interested in consulting. I mean, like my job really kind of pushed me towards fixing broken business processes, and that's like really kind of what management consulting is all about. It's about improving businesses.
Sorry, for the people that don't know, what was your job before that pushed you towards like fixing broken business practices, given no one knows
Yeah.
anything about you? Sorry.
Yeah, so for a lot of my life, so for about a decade, I've been kind of in the sewer industry, so the sewer and water industry. And
Nice.
so for kind of the last 5 years in that, I was a VP of a construction company here in Calgary. So basically, if anybody has, if you bought a new house in the last couple of years, and chances are I had my hands on it at one point in time. But yeah,
And that sounded a
that
little
was
creepy.
what?
That sounded a little creepy.
I mean, whatever. But yeah, it was good. I enjoyed my time there. It was a source of kind of a lot of happiness and a lot of unhappiness.
So, what was the happiness and what was the unhappiness like? And why did you get into that in the first place? Like, what inspired that?
So the happiness, I actually I do enjoy people, like I enjoy fixing problems. And so I guess kind of the happiness was kind of it was related to kind of making things a little bit better.
Hmm.
And so when somebody had a problem, you could kind of fix it. When there was a broken process, you could kind of improve it. It was kind of about like improving people's lives, just kind of one decision at a time. And I really I kind of enjoy that. I think it's kind of everybody's responsibility to try and make things better. And that my job was just kind of one avenue on how I got to do that. Now, of course, there was a lot of stumbling blocks, and my job kind of devolved more into a bit of a firefighter, where you would jump from one liability to one problem to any number of issues every single day, and it got a little bit heavy at times. But that was a family business. So my grandfather a construction company, and then my father was actually he owns an engineering company, kind of in that same industry. So it was kind of a just kind of a natural flow on which I kind of thought I would sort of kind of follow in the footsteps.
Okay, d digging further into that, if you don't mind me asking, so did you did you okay, so me seeing a lot of brown people growing up and stuff like doctors, things like that. Um, I have family that they're told they're going to be a doctor and then they become a doctor and there's no other thought process behind it and all that stuff. But just knowing you as a person, I'm sure that you had more thought than, oh, this is what you're gonna be and this is what you're gonna do and you're gonna do it, and then no other thought is going into it. So I guess my question to you is what inspired you to where it's was it just because you're that close with your family and there was a natural progression, or was there something more to it that because you're already explaining how you're helping people and solving problems, but was that there before you started there, or did that turn into a thing after you started?
Actually, I thought I was going to go into accounting.
Oh,
And
okay.
the only reason why I ever really kind of looked at accounting is because I've done career test after career test, and it always pushes me into um, one, accounting, two, management consulting, or engineering, and then architecture.
Yeah.
And I've never like outside of maybe law, I've never scored on anything else. But the construction company that I was working for, again, so my grandfather's company, was very, very troubled for probably the better part of a decade, maybe even two. So, at one point in time, it was in multiple cities, had a huge fleet, had, umpteen numbers of people, and through kind of mismanagement, it was dwindling every single year.
Hmm.
And so, like, my grandfather was uh, floating it with debt. So he would borrow money, against his house or his investments or wherever. Um, and I kind of thought it was part of my family responsibility to try and turn that around. Uh, and it didn't really work out that way. But at the time, I kind of thought I was doing the right thing. I
Yeah.
thought that you should be kind of willing to sacrifice, a little bit of your time to kind of help a unit.
Yeah. Mhm.
And that was kind of the honorable thing to do.
So, would you deem family a big thing to you then? Because if you felt like a knight in shining armor or attempted to at least do that, it's probably a big value, right?
I think at one point in time it was very important.
Mm,
I think a lot of things were much more important to me when I was young. I think um, people, when they kind of lack maybe a kind of a compass to guide them, then kind of rely on sort of outside organizations. Like at one point in time, I described myself as a Christian. At one point in time, I would tell you that I had a great respect for the law. At one point in time, I might tell you that family was very important to me. Um, I think when you kind of get a little bit older, like eventually the reality of that kind of sets in, and a lot of these things are like, well, they're a lot more hollow than you would expect.
mm. But do you consider that a bad thing? It sounds very pragmatic in a way, right? Like what you're talking about.
Rephrase your question.
Do you consider that a bad thing? Like you're saying it like it's like this scary reality that clicks in, but it sounds pragmatic. So I'm wondering if you were to evaluate yourself right now in this day and age, right, and look back at young John and get the opportunity to meet him or maybe bitch slap him or something. I don't know whatever you want to do with young John, right? would you look at that transition between where you were and where you're now as like, it's a positive, as in like I needed this growth in my life to get where I am? Or do you see that more of I miss young John, and young John was a great guy, and I don't want to slap him, I want to hug him and I want to bring him forward.
I think idealism um, kind of brings its own like an interest swing on your life. But if I could go back, I would steer myself in a different direction.
Where
You
would
know,
you steer yourself then?
oh, like just within the realm of work. I
Whatever you want to talk about. What would you change about yourself?
well, at the time, I dedicated so much of my life towards my work and my family. Um, it really kind of actually cost me a lot. And even at the time, when I purchased this property, I actually purchased it with somebody else. And I think work kind of played a big part to like the collapse of a personal relationship. So I kind of used work as a bit of well, as an excuse to kind of get away from home life.
Hmm.
Um, but I think, well, I mean, I kind of get into that, but the the kind of the end result. I mean, I was kind of terminated out of my position, and basically my family kind of cast me out. Um, I, of course, sued the organization, and then a lot of documents and a lot of conversations kind of came up.
Hmm.
And I think I was wrong. I was wrong to kind of have that idealism because the reality is that somebody might smile to your face, but they're perfectly willing to stab you in the back, and like family is not any different.
As a man that always smiles, like this is a little daunting that you said that. No, I see exactly where you're coming from. Like you never realize until there's a moment where a person will show their true colors or something like that, right?
Yeah, so lots of interesting stuff. For I'll kind of give you a good example. Things were kind of critical.
Hmm.
I have a bit of a savvy business sense, and I come from an accounting background, so I'm all about numbers. I would have a family meeting, kind of bring in all the members of the family and the company, and I would do a presentation and say, hey, you know what, like if we don't correct things in a couple of years, like we're going to be in really hot water.
Hmm.
Like on the same token, it's like, hey, I have a job opportunity here at another company. Where we've been having the same discussions for years and years, and it's going nowhere. Like I don't get the feeling like you guys want me here. Like, do you want me to leave? Like, I have the opportunity now. Would you like me to leave?
Hmm.
And it'd be like, I'll leave the room. I'll let you guys discuss it for 15, 20 minutes. I'll come back and just tell me your decision. You come back and everyone's like, oh, no, please stay. We need here. You contribute a lot, like all that other stuff. And then as you find out a couple months later, right after you left out of that meeting, they would go and they would sit and they'd have private conversations with a lawyer, and they're like, "How can we terminate him um, without paying any severance? How can we do that?"
It's horrible.
And it's interesting to kind of come from your own family.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds like corporate Game of Thrones, really.
Or that one show Succession or whatever.
Oh, is that what that is? Okay,
Yeah,
I need to check
yeah,
that out still. No, that's fair. Well, I guess my question to you then would be like, um, how do you think your thinking has evolved from that? Like, if you could go back to those kinds of conversations, knowing everything that you know now, right? How would you change it? So in this case, you're like letting them know, like I'm willing on leaving if you want me to leave and so on and so forth, and they're doing other stuff in the background. But if you were presented that situation now, knowing everything that you know, is there a different way you would be negotiating that or discussing that? Or like what do you think a good way of dealing with that to turn that around a little bit to be more of a, I guess, like a win-win situation, or a win-lose for the other way, depending on what you want to do with it.
yeah. Turn that into a win-win. Yeah, that one's interesting. I have thought about that a little bit.
Hmm.
On the one hand, uh, you really have to look out for your own interests first and above all. And I don't think actually there's any exception to that. when somebody says, oh, you're being selfish or whatever, I I don't view that as being a bad thing.
Hmm.
To kind of turn that into a win-win. What that should have been, uh, I kind of wanted to steer the business towards like more like a professional relationship
Yeah.
where there would be levels of oversight or where you have responsibilities and there would actually be consequences. And within a family structure like that's very uh, hostile because like you think that you should have an open enough relationship. You can just go talk, speak your mind, and everyone can kind of understand you and connect, and everybody kind of moves forward as a unit.
Yeah.
Um, Business doesn't work that way.
Hmm.
It really doesn't. There's definitely there's a human element in the kind of how we do business.
Right.
I think a lot of people kind of overlook that. Like if I could go back and do a win-win, it would have been, you know, secure the job elsewhere and then have them write it in a contract. What your conditions for staying here, and then have them sign off on it.
Right. And the
Like
only
that.
reason you stayed is because you care about your family and you thought that something could have come from there, right?
Yeah, but I thought I was doing the right thing.
Oh, okay.
There was kind of a nice narrative in that. It's your grandfather, and his construction company had been struggling for years, and you have the skill set and you could turn it around, and everybody would have been happy, and there would have been rainbows and all that at the end of it. But
That's interesting. And I have two questions from this, if that's okay. The first one is really, like, did that have a big impact on like, because you know how you're talking about like there's a segregation, or there is really very little segregation between business and like the personal stuff. Like it intertwines, and that's what you noticed from all of that, right? Like you can make a business decision, but then the personal stuff is affected, and you got to accept that. Like that's one and it's one and the same, regardless of what people look at it as. Right. So I guess my question is, how much of that dwindled to, how much, well, if you're comfortable talking about it, how much of that dwindled into your actual personal life? Like, are things still pretty bad with some of your family members and stuff, or has that rectified a little bit by now?
no, absolutely not. It hasn't. Nothing's been rectified.
Nothing's been rectified, so it's like,
Well, basically, I initiated a lawsuit against the company. They fabricated a sham defense, basically claiming that they fired me for cause and I stole a bunch of money and all this other, really, really wild stuff. And the purpose of that was to um, scare me, I think. And so basically, as the lawsuit kind of continued, and you had to sort of, I don't know, prove your allegation or provide some evidence. Um, their claim just completely fell apart. Like it was, even Swiss cheese has a structure. Like basically, um,
that's a good analogy.
when we were kind of going over the evidence, like at one point in time, like during a lawsuit, like there's something called a questioning.
Mhm.
Your parties basically digging at them for information. They would just throw away huge sections of their lawsuit, like one after another, after another, after another, after another, because they it was just so unsubstantiated. And then I started getting like apology letters. It'd be like, oh, we're really sorry. It was wrong what we did to you, and you really deserved some kind of severance, or like we could have done that any better.
Mhm.
But on the same token, it's like they would still actively defend it in court, where it'd be like, he's a bastard. He stole all this money. He deserved nothing. We want to counterclaim. We don't want to pay a penny. And so then on the one hand, it's like, oops, yeah, we're in the wrong, and then on the other one, it's like, flay him. And so anyway, this caused a lot of issues in my family. Obviously, my grandfather, for instance, would pay some of my family members to kind of come in and work on a file, like so basically to try to accumulate evidence like after the fact. And of course, like there wasn't really anything there. Um, and then of course, say my cousin and I would say have a conversation afterwards.
Mhm.
Inevitably it would just come up as a topic, be like, oh, hey, by the way, you mind if I try to extract information out of you? It's not like it's not like everything to hide. So we'll have a
No.
conversation, and then it just explodes into this political issue where it's like, hey, I heard you were talking to such and such. You know, don't talk to them. They're the bad side of the family, and then it just fragments into this fucking caveman thing.
Holy
Uh,
shit. Okay. So,
that's been ongoing for about 2 years, and there will never come a time that it will get repaired.
hmm,
The only situation I could see where it might actually get repaired is if I just rolled over
right.
and I said, okay, well, you really kind of did me dirty. You later bankrupted your own company and destroyed an entire generation's worth of wealth, and you kind of fucked me on the way. Um, but I'm willing to move past that, and let's just try to be a family again. Like even that's an iffy. Even that's an iffy.
That sounds ludicrous coming from anyone. Like, kind of shining star would you have to be able to move past all that? That's
Well,
insane.
it depends. It depends. It depends what people prioritize in their life, right?
True, true.
You know, I think one kind of the preliminary questions that you kind of sent over was, how do you define success in your life,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
for some people that family element or that stability or having those kind of close relationships, that is success,
Hmm.
and so they would be willing to compromise on that.
I don't know if that's true to that extent. I think at least in my opinion, right? I find that people that have family as a criteria for success also have an idea of what family should look like. And at no point is this their idea of what family should look like, where you're having, like, as you said, a succession. That was the name of the show, right?
Yeah.
Bloodbath that's going on in the background and like backstabbing and stuff. Because for them, at least I could be wrong. There's obviously some people that probably would, but to me, when people look at success and they look at it in family form, they're looking for some sort of structure and stability and something to count on at all times. Um, I don't know. Did you ever have family as a criteria for success in your life?
Yeah, yeah, I
You
would say
did.
like at one point, yeah, definitely.
And
Yeah.
what about now? What would you say is like if you had a successful life, what are like the three or four things that you think you would need to hit for that to be like, hey, I've done it. I have lived the John life.
If like for me to get to the very end of my life, and then I have 3 or 4 things that I needed to do.
Sure, or even right now, what are three or four things right now that you would consider like as the next building path for?
Yeah,
Because if
that
it's talking that long term, that's my bad. Like I'm sure we not everyone's thought about that.
well, yeah, no, no, no. The reason why I bring that up is, obviously because everyone's definition of success sort of changes over time, right?
Yep. No, I agree. Yeah.
And so, for me, how you kind of define success is, can you set a target, that you want,
Yeah.
and can you achieve it? And
Hmm.
it doesn't really matter what it is, right?
Yeah.
Some people, it's, can you get up and do your laundry and clean your house?
Yeah.
And that is success. For some people, you want to make $1 million. You know,
Hmm. Well, again, going back to you though, what are three things right now that you want to be able to do in the midterm? Let's call it the midterm. Or how
oh,
are you looking at success in your life right now?
oh,
Like,
I've got lots of stuff. I'm a bit of a disorganized mess when it comes to that.
oh,
But obviously,
I
I'm
think we all are. Like you said, it can apply to anything. I could wake up tomorrow and go to the gym. Yeah. Okay, I could go to the gym tomorrow and I could consider that success, right? Like that's there. But what's the goal with me going to the gym? Like, is my goal to look super fit or is it just to live a healthy lifestyle and so on and so forth? Like, there's definitely that spectrum, right? So for you right now,
yeah.
where on the spectrum are you with some of these things? What are like three or four things in your daily routine that are like there?
The only thing important for me right now,
Yeah.
and this is going to sound kind of boring, is
No, no, no such thing.
it's just getting kind of established in my career. I need
Okay.
to get out of this apartment, because I have lots of memory, both good and bad here,
Yeah.
and um, I'm just rebuilding my car.
Or what kind of
Yeah.
car do you have?
I got my RX-7. My last one exploded in a pillar of fire. Do you remember that? Or
Yeah, no, I certainly remember that. I kind of wanted you to say that, but anyway. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So those are your two biggest priorities right now. Then it's career, or three biggest, I guess. Get a new place, build up the car. Of, is it a car of your dreams, or is this just like a passion project right now, like that you're establishing with that car?
it's still like a passion project. I mean, I get interest on something and then I do it and then I just forget about it. But no, it's kind of about like sort of moving on. It's like for years I've been kind of stuck in this loo.
Yeah. Hmm.
And like immediately kind of after leaving the family business, there was a bit of a slough, and I was kind of stuck. I was kind of stuck in this apartment. I was kind of stuck.
Hmm.
At that level of my career, I was kind of stuck. I couldn't really buy anything. I had to wear the same clothes. I had to eat the same food. I couldn't go anywhere. With COVID, you can't fly. You can't. Everything has been stuck.
Jesus, dude.
And so part of that is kind of moving on. It's I think like there's certain levels that you sort of achieve in your life, and I'm really ready for the next one.
Mm. I, okay. With that being said, what are the biggest like if you were to give someone a tip and like someone's stuck in a lull, right, and they need to get out of that lull, right? Like it sounds like a endless. This sounds like the Truman Show, all right, but in a very dark way, where you're stuck in the same thing over and over again, and like that's what I'm picturing when you're saying this. Correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, this analogy in any way.
Okay.
Um, but with that, like, what's that aha moment, or what are the steps you think someone could take to try and like get out of that or figure that out? Because a lot of people go, especially right now, there's a lot of struggles with exactly that, right? I mean, COVID's coming to an end, thank God, but hopefully, knocking on wood here, I shouldn't have said that, but anyways, eventually it'll pass. Pardon?
The masks back and fall, but yeah, right.
Yeah, just because I said that, right? But like, what would your advice be to someone that's stuck in that? Because that sounds very like very dark pit that someone can fall into, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was brought me to a lot of dark places for quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So for about 2 years or so, I was kind of stuck in that, or year and a half or whatever it was. Um, Advice on that. That's kind of a tough one. I've had a lot of people kind of give me advice, and I know it comes from a good place. And lots of people will tell you, certain things. Like, oh, find some place that you can kind of unleash your stress. Go for a walk or take a sport, or I've had people kind of recommend to me yoga, or read a self-help book, or try meditation, or whatever.
Uh,
The what?
Nothing. Never mind. Sorry, I'll ask you later. Go for it.
Yeah, no, yeah. The problem I have with a lot of this stuff is it's so disconnected from like the actual issue.
Hmm.
You know, I
That's what I was gonna ask. So,
yeah, well, I probably say like last year was I probably had bouts of pretty ugly depression for a long time. And again, people would kind of recommend things like, hey, try breathing exercises, or try like waking up and I don't know, writing a smiley note in your bathroom mirror.
so the smiling note. Is it just smile at yourself?
Right. It's all about that sort of that internal dialogue, and
Okay.
the I'm sure there are techniques like that that would kind of help certain people.
Yeah, of
But the thing
course.
is that like if you think you're of sane enough mind, or you think that like chemically you're balanced enough, um, and a lot of your stress is kind of coming from like sort of external things. It's kind of about like correcting your environment, or kind of correcting that issue.
Mm.
For me, I was unemployed for a hell of a long time. Um, and as soon as I got some employment, it's like, oh, like what do you know? Like, hey, you feel better. You have a schedule. Like, there's a reason to get up in the morning. It's like things just got back in place. It's not because I wrote, or so I read any particular book and it fixed my issues.
Hmm.
Like it's not like it's kind of about like sitting down and sort of like having some self-reflection and figuring out like what is causing you the problem.
Yeah, no, well, my grandfather used to say, you can guide the horse to the water, but you can't make it drink it. And to me, like when you're reading these self-help books, you're really getting guided to the water. After that, the applications or how you apply it to yourself, it's the next logical step, but I don't know if everyone's able to do that part, right? So,
Yeah, yeah, fair enough.
okay, interesting. So, going into consulting then, like going from a phase of having a lull and stuff into, getting into a new job and stuff. Did you find the transition is pretty smooth? Like, are you able to go from like able to handle all of that pretty quickly, or has there been any sort of issue in that regard? Because suddenly the routine is more set, suddenly there's probably more stress from all of that, right? Or has it just been
No,
like everything else
like
was more stressful and having something to focus on is like the cream of the crop here?
no, like I mean the thing is that like I'm somebody who likes to work. I mean the big difference here is when you're sort of joining an organization as a junior, um, you don't have the stress of being really a manager. Like you don't have the stress of department or company process. Like you don't have to fire somebody who breaks down and cries in your office because he can't afford anti-seizure medication for his girlfriend. You know,
That
you
was
don't you
very specific, man. Like what?
like in a family business, you got like 30 employees or something like that. You kind of get to know people. Like you don't have to axe their careers. Like it's like it's a totally different world. I mean, the thing is about a job is you can box it up. And then when your time in the day's up, is you just take the box and you just put it on the shelf and you just go do your own thing. It's like there's no weight to it.
Okay, so
And
I gotta ask, given that, like, how much of that is from, previously you were a VP and stuff and you had those responsibilities, versus how much of that is, your new approach on life or your new lease on life and the willingness that like you went from such a dark place to this environment, and this environment seems a lot more fun and a lot more chill compared to not having that routine and not having that stability where it's like, you're doing nothing to doing something like you just said. It's big value to you, right? Like how much like is that has that helped at all, or am I crazy?
as what helped with what?
Well, I'm just wondering, like, how much of you not feeling stressed in this new role? Because, like, most people, like, if they first start off in a junior role, right, they don't have this, I guess, reference point of what a high stress level looks like or a high stress environment actually looks like. And you're talking about coming from a situation where you struggled with your family. You ended up in a dark pit where you're no longer able to get a release from being able to achieve things, and that's why like working with the car and stuff was all a good part of it, right? Building something, like you said, you enjoy building something, you enjoy creating something of value, right? And not having those releases for so long, like you said, it's like it's a dark, goddamn dark pit. Um, Going from that to this, right? Do you think that having those experiences in your belt has made this new experience, which would be stressful for someone that didn't have those previous experiences, like was that very impactful for that, or do you even look at it that way? Like, or is that not even like a factor? It's just this is easier because it's less responsibility.
I I mean, there's a bit of all that kind of combined in there. So like one, it is like quite a bit less responsibility. Again, like you're much more narrow in your job.
Yeah.
Like, do I think kind of having all those negative experiences, like did it um much like you were forging steel, does tempering the metal make it stronger? I mean, I guess in a way, there's a bit of mental resilience there by like having to deal with these issues. It really kind of puts you into a perspective that like a lot of things don't really matter as much as they
Hmm.
did before, I guess.
Yeah.
Would I recommend it for people? No, not really.
I don't think that was the point that I was really trying to get it there, but yeah, yeah. Go,
I,
go, go put yourself through hell, and then you'll have the mental resilience to deal with the little stresses in your life. Yeah, that's the takeaway from all of this. All right, good talk, dude. I'm done. See ya.
I, yeah, it was good. I mean, a part of me is glad it happened. Um,
Mhm.
you don't really get kind of anywhere in the life without, kind of all the ugliness sort of happening before it. It's kind of like, it's kind of like having a bad relationship with somebody.
I,
It
I would absolutely know that.
yeah. It'll happen. I promise you, unless you're, I don't know, you're arranging a marriage, with the Ukrainian wife or, some
Oh,
like that.
absolutely. I'm going down that rabbit hole next. No, no. Of course, I can definitely relate to like bad relationships. I've had them in a lot of different circumstances, right? So I understand
Yeah,
that.
you're gonna find like the depth. I mean, the depth in which you might perceive a relationship is going to be kind of proportional
Yeah, well, we'll see.
to
We'll see.
how much that in you.
We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. I'll have to take your word for that one. Okay. My next question for you then. Speaking on like bad relationships and stuff, if you don't mind me asking, right? Um, for someone that probably like hasn't experienced something like that, what do you think a good relationship versus a bad relationship looks like? I know you've kind of touched on a lot of this with your whole like family dynamic and how a lot of that is like flipped around and stuff. But just in your opinion, what are some qualities you find of a healthy relationship? And then we can talk about the bad ones next.
Okay. So qualities for a healthy relationship.
hmm
Okay, so you might have to just kind of drill down a little bit. Like what do you mean by relationship? Because let's just say that you go to the same sandwich shop every day, and somebody knows what you like. Is that a relationship? It's like maybe like if you have a good friendship or you have like like a sexual relationship or something like that with somebody like there it's a totally different dynamic.
Well, let's start off with friendships then. What does a good friendship look like to you? Like, because you were talking about how you now believe that being selfish is the right thing to do, right? And I'm sure that crosses over into your personal life as well. Like, it's certainly like from an experience like that, why wouldn't it, right? If I'm wrong about any of this, let me know. But like in regards to that, how do you keep yourself guarded and yet open to creating those bonds or those relationships with friends?
Um, I think the answer to that would probably be boundaries. I think there's kind of boundaries that you set,
Right.
and when think about having like good friendly relationships. I think it's about growth. I think you kind of both bring things into it,
hmm
and you both kind of benefit from that. And kind of when you leave at the end of the day, you're both, just a smidgen better than you were before. Whether it's how having an interesting conversation or, doing an activity together or, whatever bonding, like something like that.
What kind of boundaries would you suggest for friends?
Kind of boundaries. Um, kind of boundaries. Can you reword the question a little bit?
Well, you specifically said you got to create your own boundaries, right? So I'm more asking, what do you mean by that? Like, what kind of boundaries do you create around your friends? As in, like, what are some of the limitations? Like, I personally, I don't know if this helps, but I personally like, I would never let my friends go through my underwear drawer. I feel like that's crossing a personal line
Well,
there.
yeah, like part of it, part of trust building is like you have to uh, have to be vulnerable or open to each other, and like that requires you kind of stepping back, kind of certain boundaries, on say, some stuff that say you wouldn't talk about. Um, I think you really kind of have to do that in a bit of a controlled manner. And I think if you kind of do that in a controlled manner, it saves you maybe a bit of pain. For example, it'd be kind of like if you're meeting somebody for the very first time and you kind of overindulge, but maybe your perception of, the relationship is different than theirs, and,
Hmm.
you think it's deeper, and then you overshare, and I think that can kind of open up like a little bit of hurt, I think.
In what sense? Oh, so here, let me see if I understand this correctly. So what you're saying is essentially like I don't know, I meet someone for the first time, right? And I start sharing with them stories about, oh, I've had all these love affairs or like I've had all these things and so on and so forth, right? And like that's stuff
That would
that's personal to me.
be
And
amazing.
pardon?
So that would be amazing coming from you, but yeah.
Oh, thanks, buddy. I share all those stories and then I get nothing in return. So is that what you mean by like, different expectations in regards to where that friendship is at? As in like I get no stories back. Instead they're like, and there's like silent judgment or I feel like I'm silently being judged
Right.
for
Okay. That wasn't quite what I meant by banner.
okay.
It's related. Like that's like reciprocity, I guess.
And then
Where say that you're bringing kind of value into a relationship,
right.
and somebody willing to kind of indulge you in the same way. And so I think that's ugly for a variety of different reasons. Um, like when I say that I don't consider selfishness like a bad thing, like that would be kind of taking it to an extreme where somebody would be not willing to kind of um, bring you kind of within their circle, where they'd be sort of like willing with you.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like in that situation, like that's a bit of a red flag, right? Where maybe that person isn't going to be worth your time, or like
Right.
you shouldn't be willing to invest in somebody who's not willing to do that.
Okay. In that case, let me ask you this. Because you also mentioned there's certain topics that you wouldn't go through with certain people. Did you mean that more in a traumatic sense? Or did you mean that more like, someone's been through a trauma before, right? And then you're avoiding talking about things that would be related to that trauma? Or did you mean that like you just need to understand that what your friends like what could lead to a potential argument with a friend or something like that? Like to what extent did you mean that part of it?
So,
Hmm?
um, sorry, just rephrase your question, just shorter.
Yes, sorry. Okay, I'll try to do that for all of these now. Okay, just asking, you specifically mentioned avoiding certain topics or certain
Right.
conversations, and I think
Yeah.
you were referring to that as well in like in regards to creating a boundary, right? So my question to you is, how did you mean that? Like, why would you avoid topics with a friend? Or
I Why would I avoid topics like just with an individual or with somebody that you
well,
know?
you're talking about someone you know, right? Because we're talking about friendships and like forging those friendships, and you said there's certain topics that you can't talk with them. Or did you mean that with like just individuals and creating that friendship?
Well, yeah, like I mean, it's more like over encompassing kind of advice on until you kind of establish that certain level of trust. Yeah, there's definitely like topics that you probably shouldn't kind of cover. Things that maybe make you uncomfortable, make you vulnerable, or whatever. Like until that the other party kind of like establishes themselves as somebody who's willing to kind of
Hmm,
kind of partake in the same. That's kind of a bit of a no-go zone for me. Like
interesting.
like regarding specific topics for friends. I mean, again, it depends entirely on kind of the relationship or friendship. Like,
Yeah.
you can have, very, light, friendly relationships with somebody. You reach out and say happy birthday, once a year, and then that's it.
It was a
And you can
very
also
happy birthday. Yeah.
have, you know, you, yeah, I mean, you can also have friendships that are deeper than your family. Where like say your brother or your sister or somebody that you grew up with, your entire life. You can have friendships that are more profound than that.
Hmm.
Where say you're in really serious trouble, or you've done something illegal, or something, and then you have that level of trust.
Well, how would you identify like what kind of values do you look at in regards to turning a friendship from like an acquaintance into certain something more? Do you think it's usually more organic for you, or is it like someone provides something unique in your life, or like what kind of stuff do you look at?
For me,
Hmm.
it it's a little more organic, I think. You know, I've met people, through the very first time, you click. You can almost finish each other's sentences, you have similar interests. They're willing to kind of, um, go out of their way to kind of learn things about you. I've also met people I really didn't like, the very first time I met them. I don't have like a checkbox
Yeah.
per se
Hmm.
that you could kind of follow and then kind of predict that. I'm sure there's some kind of personality traits maybe, but I'm not familiar enough to describe
So,
it.
um, for relationships then, as in like love relationships or like looking for a boyfriend, girlfriend.